Jefferson climbs the ladder. Oh my goodness! Come
What is up, Jabronis? JJ back here with Coop, talking a little NASCAR. Sunday, July 30th. Obviously, if you just came from the baseball show, welcome. If you did not come from the baseball show, welcome. It's nice to see any of you here today. Jake already in the chat, Apone. Feel free to drop comments below. Of course, as we go through the show, we'll answer any questions. Mainly Coop will answer questions. I'll just provide some food for thought. Coop, last week, I'll be honest with you, last week was a losing transaction for me. I can tell you that. How did it go last week for you with the track and any folks you're overweight on? I know that betting wise, you probably did well, but in DFS, how did that go?
Yeah, betting wise was great. DFS broke even. It's a tough race last week. I think the speed teams came up at the end, and Marty, Larson, Hamlin. A couple others were right up there, just as we had thought. And it's an interesting race. Heard too much about it throughout the week. Based on what happened at the end with Denny and Kyle, and then also with them throwing the caution flag.
Yeah, it was interesting to say the least, which has been a common theme. Bowman wrecking was a good point, Chili. That was painful for me. Who else was painful for me? Blaney, out of nowhere. I mean, I don't want to say I practically locked him in, but I had 70 or 75% Blaney. And it was so frustrating. You know what it is? Because it was even more frustrating to see Todd Gilliland be 34 or 33% owned in the $15. And the only reason he got there was because of a well-timed accident late where he was waiting to pit and waiting for a hopeful accident. It's just so frustrating that it's you kind of put drivers in the right spots and then, randomly the car power goes out for Blaney for no reason. And an accident happens for no reason that helps 4 or 5 drivers, all that I did not have, that were all drawing dead. Ultimately, that was their strategy, right? Let's hang on to gas as long as we can, hope for an accident, because if there was no accident, all 5 of those drivers would have been outside the top 25 when the race ended. It's just frustrating, the timing of how these things happen week after week. I couldn't even imagine lining up to play Todd Gilliland at 30+% ownership. And that incident at the end of the race magically happens to get them all there. Just very frustrating.
Yeah, but I'm probably going to be in for more of the same today.
Yeah, I'm sure as I look at these ownership numbers every week, to me, some of these things seem so easy. And then, like I said, I couldn't believe that he was that high owned last week, and he ended up getting there because of that nonsense. But needless to say, it is what it is. Cue the tiny violins. We can cry on the show for an hour. We can actually give decent information. The big race, though, for those that don't know, and I'm sure some of you keep coming back, right? Jason Hamlet writes the free breakdown article every week on the site, runpuresports.com. If you don't intend on paying money for one reason or another, that article in particular will help you build lineups. It won't help you build lineups as much as the playbook will, which you need to be Run Pure Sports member, code Summer33, and that code is expiring soon with all the big sports coming to town soon. So get yourself grandfathered in, get that code. With all that said, this track in particular, Coop, walk us through, what this track is, what you could expect, and then we'll begin to go through your playbook and talk on some ownership pivots and maybe guys you're going to be high on, especially from the Dominator perspective.
Now, this is a very tough race. And I say that because, usually you think of Talladega, Daytona for all the randomness and things to that nature. And it's hard to figure out who's going to be where in there. This is kind of like a short track of that, but without the accidents. And the reason I say that is because of how the strategy plays out within this race. You're going to see some drivers in the second and third stage pit twice. You're going to see some of them pit once. And how it all ends up playing out, will probably depend upon if there's a caution flag or not. And, if you're on the wrong side of that when the caution falls, you got a long way to dig yourself out of a hole. But like usually, you have a pretty good idea. You want to attack this like a showdown, like how you think the race is going to start, so on and so forth. But with what we've seen, here in the past, it's very difficult to predict this race. This is the fourth edition of this race in this car. Each manufacturer has one win, which, evens out the playing field. If you look at the winners of this race, they've started 9th, 13th, and 13th. So does qualifying up front really mean much? But then again, all right, if you look at the winners, okay, of this race, specifically Harvick and Hamlin, how relevant were they in DFS? Denny was probably not relevant whatsoever because he led 5 laps. All right. Harvick, maybe a little bit more because he led 55 laps, So, if you look at like finishing in the stages for the top 10, the 3 winners, none of them have won a stage. Only 3 of the 6 times were they in the top 10. And out of that 6 times, they were only in the top 5 once. So, it really all comes down to flow of this race and making the right decision and being in the right place at the right time. When a critical flag happens or, somebody gets a penalty and you can take advantage of it on pit road, things of that nature. And it's a tough race to predict. And then throw on top of that today, obviously 400 laps, a lot of Dominator points up for grabs. But on top of that, we have a lot of, key names or guys who qualify or practice well, starting 20th on back. So there's going to be a lot of place differential up for grabs too. And in this race, typically, you see 3 to 4 drivers, lead 40 to 50 to 80 to 90 laps, somewhere in that ballpark. And then, maybe another 1 to 2 who lead 15 to 20 to 25. So you're going to see a lot of different, leaders throughout this. And with the amount of place differential points that are up there, like, do those place differential plays trump some of the dominators? So, it's hard to figure out. Do you go 3 dominators in your lineup and then, try to get maybe 1 place differential in there, 2 at most, then, or do you go like two dominators and then try to fill out place differential? So, there's a lot of different ways to go. But, which one is more favorable, really isn't predictable because of, we don't know how the race is going to flow.
Yeah, definitely a lot of things to kind of sift through here. And as it looks, just kind of me, at least starting to briefly view ownership, it's going to be another one of those fun place differential days with egregious ownership. Almirola, another one last week, right? Coop, but felt like he was doing well, and then all of a sudden, a guy that just kind of fell off. We'll talk on him when we get there. And Jay brings up a good point on the laps going down early. That makes a ton of sense. Double, do you like Byron today? Pit crew gets 1 to 2 spots every stop. Yeah, I mean, Coop, talk a little bit on pit crews in general, right? Because it does feel like William Byron's pit crew this year has been absolutely top notch.
Yeah, the pit crews are going to be more vital. I mean, they're important every week because the cars have to pit. But over the last couple of weeks, Loudon, the street race, you didn't see a lot of pits. So this race, more than likely, they're going to come down pit lane, 6-7 times, somewhere in that ballpark. And those teams are going to be, very important. And, I don't think there's anybody out there who's going to question William Byron's pit team. They've been on fire, and they've been the fastest by far and the most consistent by far. But, with that said, anything can happen at any time. So, the pit teams are going to play, important role. And, that might make, you worry about Chris Bell, whose pit team was god awful, a couple weeks ago. And, throughout last year and this year, they've been up and down. Same with Denny Hamlin. He gets some pit road penalties. He's going to be going down pit road a lot. His team's been up and down too. Kevin Harvick, Martin Truex, their teams are solid. So, the pit crews are going to be a very, very important day.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of good points there. And we've seen certain over the years, especially like certain pit crews really bury teams. Chase Elliott's pit crew buried him. Blaney for sure. Yeah. So either way, let's get into Dominators. And guys, if you haven't liked the video yet, feel free to do that. Okay, we're not asking you for much here. And also feel free to comment. Obviously, we love you guys. Obviously, Gavin getting in there, relating to our pain. Mentioning how Byron's too cheap, and I have a feeling you're going to want Elliott over Byron. You might be right. Especially as we talk through this with Coop more and more. Might be able to be negotiated more into that direction. But Coop, let's start with your Dominators. And look, we're going to go through the playbook. If you are a member at Run Pure Sports, you already get this playbook. So, we're just going to go through it, talk through it. But again, if you're not a member, you do get this free, video where we go through Coop's playbook, which should help you a lot building your lineups. Today with Dominators, there are laps to go around Coop. So, and 400 is actually quite a lot, to be honest. So What are we doing here? You got Reddick on the pole. Who else do we like from a Dominator perspective?
Yeah, the Dominators are going to probably make or break you, depending on how it falls out, because they're going to get points. There's plenty to go around, like you said. Typically, this is not a one Dominator type of race by any means. So I won't have any one Dominator type of lineups, even with all the place differential points up there. I'll be splitting it between 2 and 3 Dominators. So, I guess you got to start with Reddick. Not very good at this track, not very good at short tracks in general. He ended up on the pole. Do you think he leads 10 laps? Do you think he leads 50 laps? If he leads 50 plus laps, there's a good chance, he's going to do very well because of his price, as long as he stays within the top 5 type of range from a finishing perspective. But, that's a big, if. You have Kyle Busch up there, then you have Chase Elliott, you have Denny Hamlin, a lot of good drivers up there who could all challenge, for that lead very early. If you look at like the last couple races here, you look at like the drivers that have won stage 1, it's really come from the first 2 rows. And if you look at the top 3 drivers, from stage 1, it's come from the first 2 rows, except for one race, I think, an 8th place driver who started there, got there, and a 9th place driver started there, got there. So, it's hard to go from the back up to the front that short amount of time. So you got to favor, some of them drivers who are starting up front to get the early lead. The matter is, how long do they get? Do they split these laps between 2 or 3 of them? Does one of them just run away, and collect all the laps? And, those are the types of things you got to think about. And, it's a tough scenario because, I think there's a 50-50 chance that Reddick leads a lot of laps, and there's a 50-50 chance Reddick leads 10, maybe less. Who knows? But, you got to make tough decisions. And, I think I'm going to have some Reddick. I'm not going to have any Kyle Busch. Reason being is he hasn't been very good in this short package program with that car. He did do well in practice, but again, I don't even know how much practice speeds, can really help you with this race because, they split up the practices between 2 groups. The conditions are different. You saw the second group go out and they were extremely, extremely much slower than the first group. Then you get into like qualifying, laps, and you see Martin Truex and Kevin Harvick lay down the 2 best laps of the entire session to get into the final 10. And then during their, 10 the lap that they put down to determine the actual pole, they finished, 8th and 10th. Like they were horrible on it. So, it's really a rhythm track, which, favors these drivers, who are more veterans. They get better at managing their tires and things of that nature too. But, back to the Dominator, Denny Hamlin's going to be popular. Harvick's going to be popular. Truex is going to be popular. If you're playing all three of them, there's a really good chance that, lineups with one of those drivers is going to flutter because of their price, and they're not going to lead laps. I'd say there's a 50-50 chance that, two of them do lead laps, and then maybe only one of them leads laps. So, what to do with the three of them is tough. I took a 20 lineup, and I faded all three of them. Because if you fade all three of them, you're going to get a lot different. So, and then you have William Byron. I like Willie B when he starts up in the front row. He gets out there, he leads a lot of laps. What worries me is he's not in that front row. He's starting fifth or sixth. And I've never really seen him to dominate a race where he goes from that position and gets the lead. If you look at the laps of the speed that they had in practice, he was the fastest, over 10, 15, 20 laps. So I think you got to have a little bit of Willie B. His price is not, where it probably should be. He's a little cheaper than, maybe a Harvick should be. And then you have Chase Elliott, another driver up there who's starting fourth, who could very well get the early lead. So, right now, I'm heading a little bit towards a little bit of Tyler Reddick. Willie B and Chase Elliott will probably be my most owned drivers of those. And then, like I said, I'll have a little bit of, Denny, Marty, and Truex. But I'm fading them in 120, contest. And I'm not going to play, a lot of them to be, there because I don't think all three of them are going to do great. I only think one of them does, to be honest with you. Which one, you got to lead it towards Hamlin since he's up there. But I think Truex and Harvick are going to have the better longer run cars. But, that's the other piece with this race. In the older days when tire wear meant a lot, these drivers were running 60, 70 laps. And now, you're probably going to see them cut it at 50 and then take that pit stop. So, it does hurt, them to a degree. And I think that kind of helps the Byrons of the world who might not be as good at managing tires. And, he just gets out there and has a fast car. So there's just a lot to go through in this Dominator piece right here. And you got to make some tough choices on who you're playing. If you're playing one lineup, man, good luck, figuring out, which ones to hit and which ones do hit, and you hope you hit the right ones and things of that nature. So, but for me, I like Byron the most of those drivers that are starting up front.
I'll tell you this, for drivers start inside the top 10, for me, Tyler Reddick's a fade. I just think you need him to win. You're going to need him to lead too many laps from the front. 8,100 is not a terrible price, but to me, he's practically unplayable. Chase Elliott, to me, is tough to play as well. When you talk about the win equity, does he not have an opportunity to move up a lot of slots either? Byron, I think, is a really good option, all things considered. I think Truex is practically lock worthy because it'd be tough to imagine, right, Coop, that Truex doesn't get his way to the front at some point in this race, barring complications, doesn't get to the front at some point in the race and then leads laps from there. Granted, could take a few back steps, but it's hard to fathom he doesn't push his way to the front without, of course, issues.
Yeah, I mean, you would think that, but if you looked at the truck race last night, discount Ty Majeski, but after him, there really wasn't after 40 or 50 laps, because they ran a lot of long runs on these tires. There wasn't a car that came from 8th or 9th, and I'm discounting Hocevar because he was on, a different set of plan and all that. But when they were all equal, in the first stage, we didn't see a car come from like 8th to ninth and move up to second or third. Like they pretty much stayed where they were at. So, that makes me, kind of wonder, like, these Goodyear just continues to build a tire that's too good. And yeah, it had fall off, but really didn't have a lot of fall off. I don't know. So yeah, it's hard to imagine on paper that Truex doesn't get up there and Harvick doesn't get up there. But in reality, I think the chances are much better that they don't get up there than what it is on paper.
And that's fair. That's fair. I can't, I guess I can't totally argue that. It is a nice mixed bag though at the front of the 10. And I know my guy Otter was asking about Ricky. I'll be honest. I think he's a complete fade. I know that he's not going to see much ownership today. I mean, you're talking a guy that's going to see about 6-7% ownership, probably at a high level. So it's not like it's like a crazy stand. It's just where he's sitting. You want to play a guy like Stenhouse when he's got you place differential upside. He doesn't really have that. He said the problem with playing a guy like Ricky today, Otter, is he can actually race a good race, finish in ninth, and still not be in the optimal.
Well, you can say the same thing about Kevin Harvick and Martin Truex too. They can both finish fourth or fifth. They don't get the Dominator points, they're going to sink your team.
Correct. I mean, ultimately, obviously, Dominator and place differential as a whole are big. Just based on how the race plays out, I think Truex is a tough fade. And so I do think you should be overweight. I do think you should be overweight on Truex. Not you specifically, Coop, but I just think folks in general. And I think you can find fades inside there. Harvick, I'm not totally against. I don't think you should play both Harvick and Truex. Or maybe fade a bunch of these guys. Either way, find spots to be different. If you're going to play Truex is going to see ownership. Harvick's going to see ownership. So you play these guys, you got to be different.
I think that's why I said, I took 20 teams and faded Denny, Harvick, and Truex. I'm going to be completely different, because just the ownership on those three guys.
100%. And where is? Oh yeah, we'll talk on Christopher Bell because I mean Christopher Bell is like the lock. It's like the lock of the century as far as this sport goes. Which we know what that actually means, Coop. That they're far from that, but
right.
So I will talk on that, Jay, because we're getting to the next section. And why guy really appreciate you. Appreciate that you enjoy the breakdowns. Look, let's be honest, it's mostly Coop. I just kind of moved the show along. So credit to Coop there, and I appreciate that, why guy.
It's scary to fade any of them drivers up in the top. But you can't play them all. I still don't feel comfortable not playing Kyle Busch. But I just got to go on what his numbers say, and numbers say he's not good in this package. It's tough. It's a very tough week to play because of the randomness of how this race plays out.
Yeah, and I can't disagree there. And I like the Bentish Cherilus. First of all, love the name. Second of all, just right to the point, right? I need a good lineup. Give me some good driver. Right to the point. We're giving you multiple folks here that we're going to be high on or low on. Feel free to leverage that as much as you'd like. If you need a core play or you want a little more added help, go to runpuresports.com, summer 33. You'll get a much more efficient lineup there or help.
Of the drivers that you have that you're looking at in the top 10, who's the lowest owned starting wise?
Who the lowest owned that I'm going to have, or who I think?
And I didn't even speak on Bubba Wallace, and Bubba Wallace had one of the better speeds in general.
So just so I'm clear,
tough to manage, them tires and tough to trust, but he's been performing pretty well with them. Who's the lowest owned of the drivers starting in the top 10?
On my lowest owned, or what I think the consensus lowest owned will be?
Well, both. What do you think?
Okay, so I feel pretty confident that the lowest owned inside the top 10 is definitely going to be Ricky Stenhouse.
But throw him out.
I think so. Yeah, if we're getting rid of him, I guess it really depends how much Chase Elliott Love's going to get, because Chase Elliott, in my opinion, is not a good play. And maybe he'll see ownership, maybe he won't. I think Tyler Reddick is not going to see a lot of ownership in this group. To me, he's a complete fade. So I don't think he's going to see much more than 10 to 12%. I think Chase Elliott should only see 12 to 13% ownership, but he likely sees more than that because he's Chase Elliott and he's priced under 10K. Bubba Wallace, to me, in this race is unplayable. I like playing Bubba Wallace when he's 15 to 20th, 15 to 25th, where you get that place differential upside and he aims for the win. Mm-hmm. From where he's at, based on his price and his struggle with finishing races in this position, it just makes it a tough play for me. And look, I play Bubba Wallace every week, so maybe it's a good reason to play him considering I'm fading him and I get him wrong every time. So to me, lower owned guys from me specifically, complete fade of Reddick, complete fade of Elliott, complete fade of Wallace, complete fade of Gibbs. I'm definitely going to have Byron, Harvick, Truex, just not nearly as much. Kyle Busch is somebody that I want to fade, and I likely will have to because of Christopher Bell. Denny Hamlin's another one, a guy that I want to fade. I'm likely going to have low ownership on him regardless or fade. So I'll be honest, Coop, out of these top 10, I mean, three, maybe four guys max I'm playing.
And then when you look at the numbers, Hamlin, Harvick, and Truex are all owned projection-wise higher than Byron, right?
Byron's going to be about 18 to 20%.
Yeah.
He's going to be higher. He should be higher than Hamlin and Kyle Busch and Chase Elliott. Should be.
Yeah.
He's not going to be higher than Harvick.
Right.
But again, I say this, and then the projections go wild with certain things, and you look at ownership numbers, and you're like, how the hell did this happen? Like, for instance, when I see Todd Gilliland's 30%, it's like, how the hell did that happen? Like, where in your projections would make him viable to play when he's that high owned? So I don't know.
Because that's why I like with Byron, like if he's 18%, you don't have any Denny with him, Harvick with him, or Truex with him. He's going to be single percentage owned basically for you.
Yeah, 100%. And that's what makes it fun, right? There's a bunch of different ways you can skin it. I do think inside this top 10, though, you should not be playing more than 4 drivers in this slate because remember, if you're playing more than 4 drivers in this slate, your idea mentally is that more than 4 drivers can be in the optimal. I don't think that's possible on this slate. So I think max yourself out 4 drivers inside the top 10, and then we can move on to the often popular section, place differential. Boy,
a lot to choose from.
Boy, is Christopher Bell in a good spot today.
But see, this right here is what makes this section so difficult, and the Dominator section. Chris Bell's not cheap. Ryan Blaney's not cheap. Logano's not cheap. And like you got to try to balance it all to get the right Dominators, 1 or 2 probably. And then the 1 or 2 place differential guys, and get it all in the same lineup.
Yeah, I look at this slate as a whole, and Almirola is going to be chalk. And I'll be honest, like Almirola as chalk, maybe I'm being biased. He just never gets there as chalk. He's a great play, though, for the price, where he's starting from. He's a great play. Yeah. To me, when he's chalk, he never gets there. Right. And he's going to be hella chalk today. So talk me through your list, and then I'll give you my thoughts after you talk through your list.
So we'll start with Almirola. We'll start with Buescher. We'll start with Suarez. They're all priced right around each other. All right. So one thing that's going to do is that's going to negate the ownership of all 3 of them, because it's difficult to get 2 of them in your lineup if you're wanting to really hit the top. All right. Maybe playing 2 of them and all 3 of them is going to be different because it gets you away from a Blaney, a Bell, and a Logano. All right. But then it's still difficult to play those 2 Dominators unless Reddick is one of them because of his price. Okay. So the lineup construction is going to be really difficult. But then again, with all 3 of them being there, maybe Chris Bell isn't as popular as what we think he's going to end up being because 1 of his price, and 2, there's Logano, Blaney, Buescher, Almirola, Suarez, all to take away ownership from him. All right. So my only concern with Chris Bell is his pit team. The car's been really good here recently. His pit team's struggled. He does well on this flat tracks. He does well on the short tracks. So he definitely has upside. If he plays the right strategy, who knows? Maybe he gets in some Dominator points too. I don't know. But, Almirola, great fit, like him. Busher's a little more worrisome. All right. He has been very good on short tracks here recently, which is a positive. He did show good practice time if you really think about it and believe in it. And then you have Suarez. Suarez is the one that concerns me the most because this track doesn't set up the best for him. And he wasn't very happy with his car yesterday. So, they can make a couple adjustments. He can come along, do well. But, all of them's going to be, eating each other's ownership. And then you have Chase Briscoe, all right, who I think is going to be lowly owned because, one, he's having a horrendous year, and two, his starting position isn't as great as these other guys. But if you look at Briscoe, between Busher, Amarola, Suarez, even Blaney, he's probably had the best results on this short tracks tire wear package that, you have to have long runs. He was very good at North Wilkesboro. He led a lot of laps at, Martinsville. He does well here. So I think he's going to be a nice pivot for you at a lower ownership to get in there.
I think that, this section, it is hard not to be bullish on. The problem is that there's just a lot of people in the mix here. Interestingly enough, who could kind of fall off the radar, I think you might have briefly mentioned him, but like Logano today.
Yeah.
I guess the scary part for me is I'm still seeing like 27, 28% ownership on Logano, which that's high. Like I was thinking maybe, somebody, because here's the thing, Coop, to your point, somebody's going to fall through the cracks here. You got all these guys that are supposed to see massive ownership that either more people are going to play some Dominators because of all the laps, and these numbers are going to come down, or more people are going to take a stand on a few drivers and then other drivers are going to come down. I just look at it like Christopher Bell is like, if you were ever going to quote unquote lock a driver in, how is he not the closest thing we would get to what that looks like? I get his price is not great by any means, but the dude is a coin flip to T5 in this race. And he's starting in 29th. If he gets into, based on where he has to finish, Coop, assuming that the Dominators get spread out enough, what would he have to finish? 7th, 8th, 9th? To get there?
Top 10. But it's interesting. One of them is going to fall through the cracks, like you said. Like, it depends upon how people look at it too. Like Ryan Blaney has horrible track history here. Horrible. 14 races, has 3 top 10s. But the positive side of that is those 3 top 10s, 2 of them have come in the last 3 races, and then 3 of them have come in the last 6. So he is on the up and up, here. Logano, he has some good history here too. Solid history. Not elite like some of the drivers, but solid. And last couple of weeks he's kind of been on the up and up too. So one of those 3 drivers is going to fall through the cracks. And it wouldn't surprise me if it's Chris Bell.
Yeah, I'll tell you this. I think somebody mentioned in the chat about McLeod, like.
BJ McLeod.
You play McLeod. Oh well. You play him. You just need disasters to happen all around him that avoid him. There's just no way. Or you need what happened last week where oh shit, we didn't properly pit right, so now we're kind of really behind the 8 ball late in the race, and you're just sitting there at the front wasting laps, hoping for an accident, so that you can take a caution properly.
BJ McLeod might be the worst play of the entire year on this particular site. All right. He's starting 21st. Okay.
Coop,
so he has absolutely no upside whatsoever.
Don't say that, Coop, because if McLeod wins this race, I have to snip you saying that. Don't
he's starting 21st. He has absolutely no upside whatsoever. None. But anyways, what else I was going to say is, like, this is a lower attrition race. typically you don't see a lot of cautions. You don't see a lot of accidents. The accidents that you happen to see are usually single car accidents. So, when you have that type of race, it kind of leans me to be more aggressive with my ownership and wanting to, lock a driver or be 80-90% on a driver, maybe even two drivers. But with how this plays out strategy-wise, like you could get really burnt by that, So, where it sets up well from that perspective, the race flow doesn't set up well for really trying to lock in or being really high on one or two drivers.
Yeah, it's very interesting in that sense. And yeah, I mean, we'll talk on the super value plays. Is that our next section here, Coop?
Yeah, we only have one to talk about, our good old buddy.
All right, yeah. So let's slide over to middle tier, and then let's talk on value plays. They do have some things to add there.
Yeah, this is a section that we usually like. All right, where we can try to find some low-owned plays. This is a section where you try to get sneaky. I don't think this is the week to try to get sneaky because we have so many opportunities of dominators and we have so many opportunities of place differential. And like for a Brad Keselowski or an Alex Bowman starting 13th and 15th, it's going to be extremely difficult for them, to end up in, a high, finishing lineup unless they play the perfect strategy and find some dominator points along the line, which they could, but, I think the chances are very, very hard for them to do that. The only driver that I really have that I like in the teams is Ross Chastain. And, he's another one we didn't talk about, he's going to take ownership away from Chris Bell. He's going to take ownership away from Blaney. He's going to take ownership away from Mangone, or he's going to be the one that slips through the cracks and nobody plays because he's starting 19th. When you look at tire wear tracks, he's done well at them. When you look at, his week to week out of how he's played this year or ran this year, it's been inconsistent. 1 week he's good, the next week he's bad, the next week he's fast, then the following week he's slow. So I'm not going to fade him by any means because, he could be good, and I do think he comes in lower owned.
Yeah, so Chastain for me, call me indifferent today. Don't love him, don't hate him. He's been bad overall this season, especially compared to last year, but I can't mind it. Like I said, I don't hate him today. I'm not going to fade him. I'm just not going to be overweight on him. I'm going to be right around at the field, which as I look now, we got Chastain. Where do we got him at? Yeah, I mean, he's going to be popular, Coop. I mean, we're looking at least 24% ownership, maybe 23, maybe a little less than that, but he's going to be high.
If he's 25 or 24, then that means like Blaney, Logano, and Bell aren't going to be that number.
Yeah, Blaney's, it is. The Sabre usually very highly ranks the guys with place differential. And I think that on this track, you're going to see some of these guys at the top, at the front, they're going to see more ownership than Sabre's projecting. Some of the guys, because of the added ability to lead a lot of laps. So, yeah, you got to mix and match. I mean, regardless, you're going to need 1 or 2 dominators, arguably 2 dominators with 400 laps. And then you're going to need a bunch of place differential guys to round you out. Do you want to do that to be like a Chastain's a good happy medium, sitting there in 19th. He's got win equity. He could lead laps. He's got the place differential. So, yeah, again, call me indifferent to him. I don't mind Chastain today by any means. Let's move over to –
There's just a lot of options to choose from.
Yeah. Yeah. Ain't that the truth? Let's move over to value plays for today. On this slate in particular, this is where the West is won, as the cool kids say. You finding the right value guys today will make the difference in you winning a lot of money today or losing a lot of money. To me, I look at this slate. JJ Yelly and Ty Dillon, to me, are just like Todd Gilliland last week. Terrible plays that will see ownership because they're just priced very cheap. And if you're using an optimizer, which for the $15, most people are using optimizers, these guys are going to find their way in your lineups because they're so cheap. Like, it's just reality. It allows you to get, like, for instance, Coop, and why I guess I can't mind it in some breaths. If you want to play your Chris Bell with your Truex, with a Blaney,
You're going down there.
the way to do it is you're going to stick in one of these guys and grab the rosary beads and hope they just survive the little bit of attrition that might happen today. And they move up 10 or 11 spots for you. They end up in 24, 25th, get you value, and you hope the rest of your lineup rounds it out. So before you go into the value plays as a whole, can you specifically talk on the two guys priced under 5K on DK, which are, I'm pretty sure it's Ty Dillon and JJ Yelly. I think they're the only two, right? Price under 5K. Oh no, BJ McLeod, but we already talked on him, how he's a fade. So yeah, these two drivers coming from the back are definitely going to see ownership, especially with optimizers. What are you doing specifically with Ty Dillon and JJ Yelly?
I have no interest in him. They're starting in the back. They're probably going to get lapped. There's no competition caution. It's going to limit their upside. I already talked about it, how it being a low attrition race. I don't think either one of them gets out of the 30s when it's all said and done.
That's interesting. So I know we briefly talked on Suarez too, because he's in the back. Do you see any concern with him potentially getting lapped early?
Yeah. It definitely could happen. So.
All right. So that's good to know. Walk me through the rest of what you got here as far as who you are high on for value.
So, your first decision down here is what are you going to do with AJ Allmendinger? $6,200 starting dead last. All right. He's going to be the chalk of the value range by far. So you need to decide what to do with him. And then on top of that, we're looking at a value range where we don't have a lot of options to go with from place differential wise because of how qualifying shook out. We have some drivers who are in the value range starting in the teens. You have Ricky Stenhouse starting in the top 10. So I think it's another thing that's just going to add on to AJ Allmendinger's ownership. For me, I'm taking a stand and I'm not going to play any AJ Allmendinger. The guy has not been good at Richmond. In this car, he's raced here twice. He's finished 27th both times. 27th isn't going to get the job done for him. You mentioned a couple minutes ago, he is somebody who could go a lap down. I would not be surprised if the first stage is all green and he goes a lap down. Thus, that's going to limit his upside. If you look at Darlington, another high tire wear track, has not run well there either. And then, I think, the icing on the cake for me is like last year, his car was an all-star car, where they had different drivers run that car throughout the year. And he was not the driver that ran it at Richmond. One race he did, one race he didn't. And then at Darlington, he didn't run either races. So to me, that just says, we know this isn't a good track fit for you when it comes to managing tires. So, he's going to be extremely chalky. I'm going to pass on him. All right. He's never finished, if you look at his results at Richmond, inside the top 20. 20th is his best finish. This is dating back to like 2015. And then, of that, his last 9 results, only one other one was in the top 25, and that was the 24th. So, the numbers say he's not a great play. So I'm going to stick with that and go with that. After that, I'm just, throwing drivers around and hoping I hit the right ones. Eric Jones, Harrison Burton. I think Burton comes in, probably a little bit more than maybe he should. But, Austin Dillon, I think, is a good play. Todd Gilliland starting 16th, maybe he gets the job done. The positive thing about like a Todd Gilliland starting 16th, he should stay on that lead lap. Can he hold his position? Who knows? But if he holds his position, and let's say a Jones, a Haley, a Burton, a Cindric, Allmendinger, all them lose a lap, that's going to be very good for Todd Gilliland. So I'll have a couple sprinkles of him here and there. Ryan Preece is a pivot off of Gilliland. But I'm just throwing darts down here and hoping I hit the right one because none of them have exceptional, track history here. Priest probably would have been the chalk if he was starting, let's say 20th to 25th, but he qualified well. Dillon, he does well managing his tires. He could be a nice little pivot for you too that doesn't go very young.
Lot of different plays here for sure. As far as Jones or Haley, boss bro, personally Jones, but he's going to be higher owned, so take that for what it's worth. Eric Jones just sees ownership every week and does nothing every single week. It's kind of actually comical, right, Coop? I mean, have you been an Eric Jones guy, or you've been one of those guys that's been playing him and just
No, not this year. No, not
touching
this year.
grass?
But I mean, if you look at it, this is a decent track setup for him. He does well managing his tires. It's just a matter if that car has speed or not. If you look at it, Noah Gragson went out and laid down one of his best laps of the entire year, and he's starting in the top 15. So, I think Jones, warrants it this week.
And just to answer the question, how chalky will Suarez be? It's always tough to estimate with super chalky guys. I would tell you this: in high stakes, I'd be shocked if Suarez was not higher than about 25%. He should be higher than 25% in high stakes. In the $15, I would figure him to be, 35-ish, 30-ish, somewhere in there. Because if you're somebody who's playing dominators, like the heavy price dominators, you're likely going to find your way to Suarez. If you're somebody playing the lower priced guys that have chances to dominate or lead laps, you're likely playing Chris Bell. There's also going to be the people that play Chris Bell and Suarez together with a cheaper dominator. So these are all things to consider. I mean, Almirola is going to be very popular too. So it's really going to be mix and match. So that's why it's hard to kind of trust the numbers. I just know based on his win equity, where he's coming from, it'd be hard to fathom Suarez is less than 30% really in any contest, to be honest. All right. So Coop, let's move over to your fades. Who specifically do you think makes sense for good fades this week? Oh, I like that I see Bubba Wallace on there. We might be holding hands.
Yeah. Bubba, I'm not going to play with. Kyle Busch, I'm not. It's a tough decision. Ty Gibbs traditionally is not good on, managing his tires. Stenhouse and Gragson, they're just starting way too far forward. All right. Keselowski, I hit on earlier. Bowman, I hit on. I just think it's going to be difficult for them. Kyle Larson's just another one I'm taking a stand on. His price, the price differential is not going to get it done for him. He needs dominator points. He won the spring race, but, traditionally this isn't a great track for him. And then all the other bottom drivers we talked about. And then Corey LaJoie is another driver I'm fading. He doesn't typically do well on the short tracks.
Yeah, and I think I gave you guys a bunch of folks that I wasn't necessarily high on as well, especially from the top of the pack. I mean, from the bottom, look, Ty Dillon, JJ Yeley, I do think makes sense to fade. But with that said, because of their price and because usually NASCAR is not like a crazy issue in regards to price. Like normally you can kind of make things work. Today, you are going to feel a little budgeted.
Oh, yeah.
Okay.
I would probably say today of most slates, you're going to see more lineups use all their money or leave $100 on the plate. Like you're going to use a lot of your money today, if not all of it.
Yeah, and the budget's tight. DK did a good job with pricing today. So it's going to be tough, which is going to be why I think these two drivers in particular are going to see decent ownership. Because it's you're just hoping one of them just kind of doesn't hurt you, because it does allow you to get guys that have a tremendous amount of upside today in their points. And, accidents happen or whatever, and these guys happen to magically slide inside the top 25, and boy, are you golden. Because think about it, at their price, Coop, you can, in theory, right, we'll just talk theoretically, you can play those two specifically in the same lineup, and you can just stack top price guys. I mean, you have this crazy amount of money. And again, the only way that works out for you is, first of all, if those two happen to finish inside the top 25 and the four drivers you get have two massive place differential guys and then two dominators that collectively share probably 100 laps each. That's how that happens. It will make you different. Or maybe it won't, depending how people build their optimizers. I mean, but if those two are in the same lineup, that is definitely an interesting look for a lineup.
Yeah, this is a slate also where there's a lot of chalk, but I think you're going to see a lot of variations in the lineups within that chalk, where some slates, it's really chalky, and you see a lot of the same duplicated lineups. I'm not so sure today you see as many duplicates, even with all the chalk.
Yeah, it's very interesting. But I'm looking at a lineup here that hand built that has Dylan and Yaley, and I'll tell you, you get your chalk around them. That's for sure. But again, it's you're basically asking for something that's very low risk. I mean, that's very low potential outcome. And if people are letting these guys into their lineups from an optimizer perspective, it's not like it's going to be like that different. Like there's going to be people that play both those guys in the same lineup and then just build studs around them.
Have you ever hand-built 20 lineups before you looked at anything optimal for the entire slate? Okay? And it doesn't have to be NASCAR. It can be any sport, okay? But have you ever built 20 lineups, hand, and then printed them out, looked at them, and then ran an optimizer for 20 lineups and saw, like, how different or close it was? And do you think there's an advantage to doing that or a disadvantage maybe?
Yeah. So I've only done that in college football, and it's actually lost me money fact checking it after the fact because
not using the optimizer and going by hand.
It lost me money using the optimizer after to compare, just to see where I'd be vulnerable. Because look, at the end of the day, you don't only have to use an optimizer to build your lineups. You can use an optimizer to help you understand where player projections are, leveraging ownership numbers. And sometimes if we as gamblers, we take too big of stands sometimes, and we don't realize how much gap we've given ourselves of risk aversion, if you will. Mm-hmm. So when I look at it, sometimes when I was doing college football, doing that process, I actually stopped doing it because it was losing me money. I would start modifying things to give myself a little bit of headroom. And, oh, shit, this guy's going to be this high owned. I didn't even have him on my radar. And then the guy completely flubs, and now I've wasted 20% of my lineups because I said, oh, I should probably have some exposure here when I didn't need it because I guess it comes down to how much you trust your own numbers or not. But now, especially in that sport, trust your own numbers for me. But in NASCAR, there's so much variance to the sport that it definitely makes it difficult to have your takes, go with your takes. But you still should see ownership numbers in NASCAR. I think it helps you at least give you an idea of where the field's going to be and where you can pivot. It's a different sport than college football.
Gotcha. Cool.
But all right. So that kind of wraps it up. Gave you a lot of good info. We went on for quite a bit. Hope you guys found this informative and helpful. If you did not, I don't know. Go, as the cool kids say, what is the new saying now? Go and touch grass. Feels like everybody's saying that now. But I will promise you this: after this show, I will be going outside and touching grass. But either way, yes, guys, gamble responsibly today. Build your lineups as best you can. Include 1 to 2 dominators in every lineup. Include 3 to 4 value / place differential guys in every lineup. I think you're going to need it, obviously, to cash big today. And then find your spots to be different. If you're combining a bunch of guys that you know for a fact are going to be 30% owned and you're doing single entry, make sure you include at least 1 to 2 guys that do appear to be less than 12, 13% owned to round out your lineup better. If you're using an optimizer, kind of choose to use the similar rules so that you don't have dupes, you don't have duplicate lineups. And that's another problem. People create optimizers and then half their lineups are duplicates. So you're basically drawn dead right from the beginning. Find ways to be different, especially in this sport of all of them. And I hope that that makes sense. Real quick on Gavin, it's a bit in reverse. Optimizers can give you ideas beyond what you can hand build. I don't disagree, Gavin. I think you can use optimizers in many different capacities. Obviously, to the point I just mentioned before with Coop, optimizers did open my eyes to plays where I was like, you know what? I really wasn't high on this guy or gal or car or whatever, but now I can see why people might be. And then maybe, that ends up adding more to your manual builds. But, it does go back to sticking to your stands or your takes, because optimizers can muddy your own personal biases, right? But look, with all that said, gamble responsibly today, folks. Stay safe as always. Run pure. We'll be back next week. Good luck today, guys.